All right. Hello, everyone. Just to do a quick mic. You can hear me. Just like so.
In and out. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay, great, great. All right. Good afternoon from my end, everyone. It's nice to be here, and today is going to be a great day. We're going to be talking about AI, but before we go into the main agenda for today, I want to use 30 seconds to talk about ProDevs, since ProDevs is the one hosting this show. It's only fair that we talk about who we are, so you know us at least a bit. So ProDevs is, I would say, the community here for
Still their confidence?
Yeah, I do think that Confidence has some network challenges, right? But while we wait for him to return, you're welcome everyone to this conversation, Unlocking Africa's Potential with Artificial Intelligence. This is the first of many monthly series that we are going to have expert guests join us to speak about how AI can transform the continent. And why we're doing this is because we see clearly the potential for AI across many different sectors. In fact, the reason why we chose to do education first is that, clearly we've seen in business that AI follows something called the 10-20-70 principle. So artificial intelligence is 10% about the technology and tools, 20% about business processes and systems, and 70% about people and cultural transformation. People and cultural transformation is fundamentally driven by education, which is why we have chosen to have this as our very first conversation. And I have, the pleasure of Mr. Delente Leiblis, who is an expert in his own right. And I will ask him to, introduce himself at some point. But just to, welcome you all again. We see all of you coming in from different, different platforms. It promises to be an interesting conversation, and we hope that you're able to learn, one or two practical things that you can apply in your own, workflow after this session. The purpose of today's conversation is to examine the education sector and all the ways that we think that artificial intelligence can transform how we capture and create value in that space. So without further ado, I like to give our guests the opportunity to introduce themselves, blow their own trumpet and tell us all the cool things they do in the world and all the ways that they make the world a better place for all to live. So, Mr. Delente, the floor is yours. A quick introduction, and then just let the guests know, let the audience know what you do, who you are, and what makes you special.
All right. Thanks, Orkwe. Thanks, ProDev, for inviting me here. I won't blow my own horn here, so I'm actually going to keep it quick, just because people go on LinkedIn or wherever social media and see the bio and got credentials. But I would say, listen, I've been, I sort of my career has been within the technology field for over 20 years now. Actually, there's a certain, and then kind of landed into ed tech. So it was full circle. Got into development, software development, and then even landed into the space of ServiceNow, which is a platform that a pretty enterprise platform, SaaS platform, and that's been kind of the bread and butter. And then I moved into education. And now where I'm sitting is education tech. And I have a couple companies that I've run, startups that are in that space. But really why I'm here is not even for those things. The here is to make this technology and this knowledge accessible to our African diaspora. That's really what I'm doing. That's the end goal. I mean, yeah, I got degrees and credentials. We can talk about those things. Those are nice. But at the end of the day, for me, it's just making this work for those who are underserved and who have, and really to break from the shackles of what we've been through for a long time now.
And I mean, 20 years is 20 years is a lot of experience, right? I respect that a lot, which is why we're having this conversation today. And I believe that in those 20 years, you've been exposed to all kinds of interesting digital transformation strategies,
Sure.
especially with respect to how the continent or different countries can transform their sectors, education sectors, to start with. And when I speak about digital transformation, I'm referring to the AU Digital Transformation Strategy 2020 to 2030. I believe there are 4 foundation pillars. And the reason why I'm referring to these 4 foundation pillars is that the conversation we're about to have about the digital transformation of education is impossible for us to do justice to this entire conversation without us talking about the pillars for digital transformation of the continent, of different countries as a whole. So I'd like for us to start this conversation with just a quick overview of the 4 critical pillars of digital transformation that the AU has considered as fundamental from 2020 to 2030. And I know that lots of what we're going to say here today is focused on the digital skills and human capacity angle. But I think it's necessary for us to look at the other 3 and then link it to digital skills and human capacity. So if you can just please enlighten us on what are these 4 critical pillars that we must think about as a country. When I say as a country now, I mean as Nigeria, and maybe as a country, as Ghanaians or any other African country, and then as a continent collectively.
Yeah, and just to, again, back up, we want to reference this African Union paper that was put out, or it's a document that is called Digital Transformation 2020-2030. Again, one of the things we don't want to talk about, yes, this is a conversation about AI in some respects, but we don't want to keep it in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
Because there's just no possibility that we can do any of these things unless there's a few things that are working in play, which is governmental policy, which is one of the first pillars that we're looking at. Governmental policy, enabling environmental and regulations. There's infrastructure. This is going to be critical, right? I mean, we're talking about the sense of escalating our AI means within the continent, or even just if we're just speaking of Nigeria, you're going to have the infrastructure in place, right? Because these things, the amount of resources and power that is required for this won't happen unless we do that. So that's the other thing. The third piece, as you just talked about, which is going to be primarily what this conversation is going to be around, is digital skills and human capacity, which is a big deal. And then the other one, the 4th one of this, is digital innovation and entrepreneurship. And listen, right now there's an amazing amount. I'm just seeing an amazing amount of entrepreneurship coming out of Africa. Just startups that are just rapidly starting to pop up, and they're going to need. We want to enable that. We really do want that. We want the 3 kind of processes of government policy, private industry, and even entrepreneurship kind of working together. But right now, what we're looking at, Ogwe, is the private industry and the entrepreneurship just driving things first, leading the process. And then we'll hope that government, the government policy will kind of follow along, right? And you see, I'm laughing about this, but it is going to be a necessary thing that we have our governments, including in Nigeria, right, going along and seeing the kind of progress and the need for this type of thing to be out and get out in front of it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes. I mean, I totally understand and can relate to it. As someone who, plays in the AI space, I do see a lot of the investments, infrastructure investments that are being done in other continents. I mean, Europe, for instance, last year they announced, 7 new AI factories. These are, critical infrastructure, right? And only recently, the European Union announced, at least a 200 billion euro investment in AI. Right? Yeah. So we hear all of these, mega investments in different continents, and then, not so many from our own side, our own side of the world. And even when we hear Microsoft investing billions of dollars in India and several other places and training tens of millions of people, there are not so many opportunities like that on the continent. So, which is part of why we are having this session today, right? And I'm particularly interested in three documents, three research papers. One is from the World Bank, and it shook the world. It made a lot of wave around the world. What excites me is that study was done in Edo State here in Nigeria. In that report, it was shown how it's possible to use an AI, right, Microsoft Copilot, plus teachers, so a human-in-the-loop arrangement to achieve 2 years of learning in 6 weeks, right? Remarkable study. And then we saw another paper from Harvard, the Harvard study that proved that it's possible to achieve 2 times the learning gain with AI copilots. But in the midst of all of this excitement about how AI is driving education, we've seen that there are cases where if care is not taken, if we do not manage how AI assists the education process, it can become a crutch, it can become a disability, or it can harm the learning process, right? So there are 3 papers we're going to consider, because we like to have factual conversations, whenever we come on this show. So, Mr. Delante, I just want you to have just a quick reflection on these 3 papers, which you're very familiar with. The World Bank case study from Nigeria, the AI critical thinking paper, that's how AI may impact critical thinking, and then the Harvard paper. So just a quick overview of these 3 papers, and then we can go into the questions coming from these papers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again. I mean, so I'm going to just discuss briefly the papers, but I will kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent here, because I think it's necessary to really get back at what the sort of basis of this. The Harvard paper specifically, where it discusses how they were able to engage their students more so with AI than the professors or the teaching. And they did a certain case study, and it's a small sample size. What stood out to me more so than anything is not so much even how AI was able to engage the students, but what's wrong with the teaching and the engagement of the professorships and our educators. And to be fair, I educate and I teach, but what's going on with the pedagogy where we're not engaging the cognitive levels of our minds, of our young people, right, today? And so there's an issue there. And this even was going on well before Gen AI became on the scene. So I think we want to, that's sort of the bigger picture that we're looking at, is that the educational structure, whether it's in the West, whether it's in Africa, we have to look at that and say, hey, how are we, what's our pedagogy? What's our ability to engage the thinking in the minds of our people? And that's what stood out the most. And so the other thing is, we're talking about Harvard, so I want to make sure that we also want to keep certain realities here too, right?
Yeah.
Because the study was done. And see, I've done some I've done recruiting for research studies, and guess who they recruit? They recruit the students on those campuses. So we're talking about Harvard students, right, who are being studied and have a case study. So we're looking at, in terms of financial elite, this is 0.0001% of the world's population, financially. So it's hard to really map that to rural groups within Nigeria, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So the mapping isn't one-to-one. I even would say throw out their playbook altogether, because we want to reimagine how we want to deal with Africa and the entire diaspora when we're dealing with our children. One of the and so that's the other thing. So the one piece that article that you were talking about in terms of cognitive levels and cognitive unloading, that to me is probably the most interesting piece in all of this, because even there, they identified that too much reliance on AI will reduce. And if they showed the study, there's a short study, but now they're moving into longitudinal studies, will reduce the critical thinking skills specifically of young people. That the actual data that was shown that young people and their ability to actually to think critically, to problem solve, have been reduced for the youth more so when it was relative to the older audience. So it actually shows to me that we still want that human intervention, right? When it comes to the pedagogy, again, of how we're engaging our young minds. And yes, we can use the AI, which we'll talk about more, as a tool to augment the genius of our professors, to really go along the side of our professors and our educators, and helping them move and accelerate the thinking of our young people, but not as the crutch for it. So those are the things. Again, I said I wanted to give a little bit of overview, but that tangent is there's no one-to-one from Harvard to Nigeria. We can't do that. We don't do that at all. There's a specific culture that we're dealing with, right? And there on the West, we're gonna keep that over there where they have specific ways of how they're teaching. Their philosophical underpinning is different. We want to make sure that we have a sense of our own ancestry, our own philosophical underpinning, and begin to root ourselves into that.
I mean, fantastic reply. And I mean, just to piggyback on what you said, we hear a lot about Bloom's Two Sigma study, right? Which show that if you provide personalized tutoring to a student, it's possible to move them from being a C student to an A student, right? Mm-hmm. If you are able to teach people at their own pace, you can unlock some, magical possibilities, right? And that's why, this promise of Gen AI in education is actually very important. Okay, so I mean, you have said that it's impossible to do one-to-one, from Harvard to to the rest of the world. In this case,
I wouldn't say impossible. I would just say we don't want.
Okay, yeah,
impossible. That's a strong word.
Okay, thank you for that correction. But I have seen something something which is a bit unfortunate, because the recommended student to teacher ratio is 1 to 25 for pre-primary, 1 to 35 for primary, and I think 1 to 40 for secondary education. Mm-hmm. But there have been instances where you see 1 to 80, 1 to 100, which is not supposed to be, right? And then when you ask people in these spaces, why do we have this kind of mismatch? Why do we have teacher shortages? They'll tell you inadequate funding. They'll tell you not enough infrastructure, weak quality assurance, and what have you. So these are some of the issues that we have seen. But then it now looks like if we can use a Gen AI tool to accelerate learning gains for students across board, how do you think we implement this in Nigeria, in South Africa, Ethiopia, and all the other African countries? And I ask this because of the specific response that you gave, that when we're trying to take the gains from a Harvard study, we have to be careful how we implement so that it reflects our own identity and our demands as a people, right? So and then in asking this question, I'm referencing that study done by the World Bank in Nigeria, where in 6 weeks they were able to help the students acquire 2 years worth of learning. So how do you think we approach that challenge, fixing this problem of inadequate infrastructure and teacher shortage. So instead of 1 to 25, 1 to 35, and 1 to 40 for pre-primary, primary, and secondary, we have a case of 1 to 50, 1 to 60, sometimes even 1 to 100. I've been unfortunate to be in 1 to 200, right? So how do we fix this? How do we fix this situation? In your own words.
Yeah, I mean, these are structural changes. Again, these are more. We're dealing with the policy, and again, as we talked about in the beginning of the call with the AU digital transformation, these are the parts of the pillars in which we need. We will need government involved in this, but potentially we'll also have the private industry and entrepreneurism, which can combine and come together and really discuss this, because this is a systemic thing that you're talking about. And I think in terms of the ratios, Africa, even in India, but particularly Africa, we're looking at probably some of the worst ratios to parent to, or teacher to student ratios. And I think that is a systemic issue. What we're going to look at is, I want to make sure that we understand the different kinds of levels in which students are facing, right? Because you're going to have, just on that curve, right? Even if you were just to look at the development of the curve, there are people who are going to be rated within a certain speed of which they're developing, they're understanding concepts. There are going to be people within the normal range, and then there are going to be kids who are going to be very quick at getting it. So we want to treat them all. You can't treat them all equally, right? And as an educator, I see this, and some people just kind of naturally get it faster than others. Okay, and so even with the studies that you're pointing out, they saw a marginal change with using the Gen AI with those people who have a higher level of thinking capacity and fast expedited thinking. They saw marginal changes there, Orkwe. Really, where they saw the change, and what you're identifying as those who are kind of at the end, who have never even touched a computer, never even seen a book, or the reading capabilities are kind of low. That was where we can start to use these tools as a way to kind of accelerating them and at least getting them to a kind of normal range, if you will, right?
Yeah.
But there won't be again. That's why I don't want to use Harvard as the pinnacle of this, because these are people who come from, again, these shout out to Kevin coming on, but these are people who are coming from a certain situation where, I mean, some of the best educational institutions, whether it's high school or boarding school, right, where they have specific types of one-on-one tutoring, they have all that. So we cannot use that as the means. We can glean, and I think that the evidence is compelling, yes, but what we're dealing with Africa is different. So we want to make sure that we look at all of this and be careful when we map this. But what I'm bringing up is there are going to be these types of sort of gradations of different types of thinking and speed of individuals. We can break this up. We can break this up, right? And take those individuals who are kind of behind, quote, and I put that on quotes, because what are we talking about when we say behind? Well, what I mean by that is they're not getting the fundamentals. They don't have the fundamentals there, right? We're not keeping up with, again, I don't want to keep up with the West. What are Africans here? What are they behind? Well, we want them to have a certain command of their language. We want them to have the certain understanding of their history, the ancestry. We want them to be able to have the capability to read the language and communication, and have a certain acumen and confidence out in the world. So those people who are lacking in that, we want to accelerate that grouping of people within these classrooms, even if you do have such a larger classroom. So we can in a sense, we can break this up, and then utilize the tools, the AI tools, to help accelerate those people to a certain normal level. And then there's so many other things that have to go on in play. But I think we'll talk about this, which is it's not going to just be in the classroom. This is where the private industry can come into play. This is where some of the governmental institutions can come into play, where we can have apprenticeships, we can have hands-on types of work with students, where they start to really get a visceral sense of what they're doing and the concepts in Africa. You understand? So we don't just want to leave it within the classroom, but there's some moving and dynamic processes that we want to have when we're dealing with young people. More of an experiential type of learning could possibly go on there. But to answer really on the I just say, the ratio scale, man, that's going to be a longer stream of work. But I'm just identifying, again, we can break this up, section it off, okay, and begin to use these tools, again, not as a replacement for the human interaction, but more as the ability to guide and be an assistant to those professors and teachers.
And I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with that comment about augmenting, not replacing, right? We do have a question from Kevin Fomengia. I hope I got that name correctly. We'll get to your questions just after this. In the next line of conversation, we'll start to take questions from the audience. So just keep the questions coming. We have the first one from Kevin Fomengia, and so this is a very interactive session. So if you have any questions whatsoever about anything you've heard on this show, or some other question you have with respect to AI in education, please do not hesitate to ask. Questions are welcome, and we would love to answer as many as possible. So, but going back to what you said, Delante, about the participation of the private sector, I have seen some interesting investments, particularly by Microsoft, right? Well, not in Africa, but they invested about $3 billion in India and committed to train 10 million Indians. So they're doing 2 billion per year, 2 million in 2025, all the way to 2030. And I believe that teachers are some of the people who are going to be trained. The goal is that if you train teachers, they can go on to train their own students and what have you. And I have also seen investments by the private sector in Nigeria and a few other African countries. Only last week, that's on Thursday last week, Microsoft announced $1 million investment in Nigeria, right, to train 1 million people. So you can see, if you're mapping that cost, it's like $1 to one person. And a lot of people complained about that, the quality of that investment. What's this supposed to achieve, right? So what I see here is that we have the opportunity to reimagine how education is done on the continent with the help of all of these Gen AI tools. And you've correctly mentioned that what we ought to do is to engage the individual learner at their level of participation, right? And how they are willing to absorb this material. So having said this, what must the private sector, when I say private sector now, the African private sector, the telecom companies, the banks, and what have you, how do you think they can participate in ensuring that the gains of Gen AI, right, such as the World Bank study we saw in Edo State, Nigeria, that it's something that is scaled up, right, so that for as little as $1 million investment, if they can do that much, they're able to make a lot of transformative impact in society, not just for now, but in the future, especially because every now and then we hear that the African continent is the youngest continent in the world, median age of 18 years, and that by 2040, we would have more young people than any other continent in the world. In fact, for every for every one young person you meet in Europe by 2040, you have 4 from Africa. So it looks like an interesting opportunity, but education is the bedrock, or rather the soil in which this opportunity is going to, grow and, bloom. So how do you think the private sector must begin to participate today so that we don't miss out on this, seeming opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just get a shout out to that what you just said. Let's lift that up. We have the youngest population in the world. I've traveled, and look, I mean, there's just people are young, they're vibrant, they're entrepreneurial, they're moving, they're resilient here in Africa. And you go to Europe, and people are getting older. Of course, you're only going to get older. The population's declining, right? You go to East Asia, population's getting older, it's plateauing. Okay, Japan particularly, they're older. Yeah, they're doing things, but not in Africa. I guess that's why Elon Musk is having all these children, right? He's trying to keep up. He's not going to be able to do that, though. There's no way. It's too late. It's too late. We're growing and we're vibrant. But I want to say we can't depend on those Western companies. We just can't. There's not an ability for us to think that Microsoft is going to come in there, Facebook, the Metas, and the Apples of the world are going to come in and save us. There's no handouts. We never really had any handouts. There's no none of that here in a case. And that's why I can understand why people are upset that Microsoft just basically threw a little bone at us. Hey, a little bone. Here you go, little Africans. No, we should actually give it back to them. Well, maybe not, but I think that's the CEO of Microsoft. He's Indian, and he's looking out for his people. I can't hate him for that, but we have incredible minds within the African diaspora who are as wealthy as ingenious, or to have companies that are private in the private sector that have moved the needle. Okay, our friend in Nigeria there, our oil magnet. We should make sure we tap into that, right? Those resources and that the financial structure to be able to utilize that as a way to spilling back into the economy of Nigeria. Okay, but the private sector, look, they're there for profit. Let's just face it. I mean, that's at the end, it's just their bottom line, and so you're gonna have to engage them in a way that they can see that this has the ability to make a particular profit for them. And so here now comes the entrepreneurs all over Africa who can demonstrate how this, in fact, and this is just, again, that's why I was tapping on this young, vibrant, resilient population that we have. We'll have to kind of lead the charge in showing how we can take these resources, the little bit of resources, particularly the open source resources, and accelerate, right, the development of our technological advancements there, even in Africa. What I loved just in the last couple of weeks, with all this kind of DeepSeek extravaganza that you saw, really, it was interesting. And let's talk about that. I think what it showed to me really wasn't so much China, and that that we could talk. There's something there, but was that when I saw them put that out, and let's just say hypothetically, even if they did build their language model on a fraction of the cost that we do it here over in the West, if they did that, to me, it said that any other country can do that. Right? Mm-hmm. We can grab those resources. We can create and tap into that open source. In fact, we can create our own models. And a shout out to those who are doing that right now. They are creating their models in Africa, but we can put out a similar aspect of models right here and utilize the open source and the APIs and start building ourselves. Okay. So that's DeepSeek said to me. I'm saying, I thought Africa was right there. I said, okay, we can grab that too. We can do the exact same thing. Now, there's cost to this, and we could talk a little bit about that too. So nothing's free, right? There's resource constraints, especially in Africa. In fact, I want to even dive a little bit into that, because when we say open source and free, there's really not any freedom there, because the amount of resources that we're using, which primarily are coming from Africa, right? The energy production that's being used, whether it's cobalt or uranium, you name it, it's coming from Africa. So when we're talking about being responsible, that's there, right? And it is an issue. Even the human labor is an issue. Some of these Western companies are using our own people to do clean data and data cleansing and this kind of thing. So there's nothing free. But that aside, open source as a technology in and of itself, we have the ability to tap into that too and start building our own models here, right? Now it's going to tie us back to data and the data centers, okay? And because if you're dealing with DeepSeek, you're dealing with data centers that are in China, right? And so we don't want that. We want it right here on the continent. And that will have the ability to have security, management of our own data, a lack of we'll have a better latency, okay, bandwidth. Because right now, I mean, there are data centers there, even in Nigeria and Ghana and so forth, as we know, but we need more. We need more if we're going to escalate this. Right now, we're still relying on data centers in the UK. There's some in South Africa, I know, but that infrastructure, as the AU was talking about, is part of the pillar, right? And so this is going to be incredibly important if we're going to do that. Now, one of the things I saw Kevin Flamingo on there, and let me give another shout out to him, because I know he's working with a group in Ghana, Enterprise Computing Corporation. This is a data center group that's located in Accra, Ghana.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and they're expanding their data centers, and these are miniature data centers. It's nothing crazy like what Mark Zuckerberg is doing here in the West America with campuses and data centers. No. These are modest data centers, but they're expanding. And hey, they're they're a small company, but look what's happening now. The private industry is going to them because they see what exactly they have done. Not only the private industry, but also the government. So the University of the Bank of Ghana even is going to this corporation here because they see the expansion that's happening in other parts of Africa, right? And so that entrepreneurism that's what I mean. We'll kind of have to drive this process where others will start to see, we understand how it can develop profit. We understand how this could be useful for our population, and so on and so forth. So I'm looking at those three processes, Orokwe, as a way of working together. But what's driving a lot of this will be our young, vibrant, resilient population that we have in Africa, and that is going to make things. That's what I'm looking at as moving the needle.
Yeah, and again, your response again ties back to our original conversation: the need for digital infrastructure, innovation and entrepreneurship, and of course, human skills and capacity. So let's now go to this question from Kevin Fomenga. And I like this particular question because it already ties into something we're going to talk about. I do know that, in the southeastern part of Nigeria, for instance, some governors in that part are focused on education. And what they're actively doing at this point in time is that they're renovating a lot of schools. They're doing a lot of things to try to revive education in their state. But one thing that I think they're not doing correctly at this point in time, and perhaps after this session, they can learn from what you answer and start to do it, is that they recognize the times that we live in. Like it's a new paradigm altogether. People have called it the AI age, right? So that if you look at the 5 levels of AI maturity: level 1, chatbots; level 2, human reasoners; level 3, agents, where we are today; level 4, innovators; and level 5, autonomous organizations. We're in a world where people would operate at all of these 5 levels. We're using agents today, but it's only a matter of time before we have AI systems that can, think of new ideas, that can generalize outside of their training set. And according to, the big AI labs, OpenAI and Anthropic, they're promising that you will have AI systems that can run entire businesses. So schools today must, focus on producing people that can work within this new paradigm. So Kevin was asking that how do we leverage AI to train African educators? And so for those states in Nigeria who are renovating their schools, and some of these school buildings are actually really nice. I mean, if you look at them, you think that, it's somewhere in Singapore. They're really that good. But I think what they're not paying attention to is they are not equipping their educators enough to prepare their students for this new paradigm of working with AI agents, working with autonomous organizations, and just this AI native economy that is forming before us. So in essence, what Kevin is trying to find out is, and this is from his experience, he thinks that educators lack digital skills. I think we've both seen that in our line of work. So he's asking, what is the best approach for African governments to take? And let me just add something to this question. I saw something by the president of Y Combinator, Gary. He said something that, and this was in the heat of the H1B debate, right? So some people were saying that the reason why America depends on STEM graduates from China and the rest of the world is because their education system is is a bit, I wouldn't say superior, but produces people who are really competitive. And he said something that in the next 5 years, what they're working to do is ensure that you have AI tutors in the hands of every American student, right? So there's a vision there, like clear vision, but part of making that vision a reality is that the educators, the teachers will be equipped to stand as a human in the loop for all of that, vision to come to fruition, right? So what's your take on leveraging AI to help train African educators so that we have people who are fit for the AI native economy? And it's not a case of, we teach them these things or, people go to school here, but they're not, they're not aware of the things that, or the new way that the world is supposed to operate. So that's Kevin's question.
Yeah, appreciate the question, Kevin and Orkwe, and you hit on some important points there. Again, I think we want to throw out and not just depend specifically on the Western playbook. That is because dealing with a different population.
Yeah,
we're talking about the original man and woman of Africa, and we don't want to have just the one-to-one mapping completely of what the West is doing. There's some things that we can glean from that. There's some things that even we can take from what China is doing and even India is doing. But for the most part, this is our own population that we're dealing with. We understand our own culture. We understand our own the languages and things in the community there. So we want to steep if we're going to be serious about the AI, we want to steep our training, even of the AI, around what we know to be within the culture, the specific African cultures, right? And not go from the standpoint, because as a I go through much of my background, but as a developer myself, I'm a former developer myself. I come in as I bring my baggage, right? When I go to develop, you bring your philosophical underpinnings, you bring everything with you when you're developing these tools, right? And you may get some training here and there on accessibility. You may get some training on responsible AI, maybe a class or two. prior to going into working for whatever company or for building out your own product. And that's and for me personally, as someone who's trained in Western schools, I'm bringing in that kind of thought process, and it is a certain colonial Western thought process into my development without even knowing it. You understand? So what I would say is that we want to have our own folks there who are developing these language models from the beginning, steeped into the African language already and the cultures already of their own people, which are building it from the ground up there. And then as a way to making sure that, yes, the teachers, and he's right, there's digital literacy, and that's all over the world. There's a lack of digital literacy here, even in the West. I mean, the educators are there. So, what I'm looking at is that there has to be a certain concerted effort of training the trainers for sure. I mean, that's obvious. That's an obvious point that we would have to do. But just to get and hammer in on Kevin's ideas, making sure that those developers, and we have developers, African developers, we have people all over the African diaspora who can go in with their own thoughts, philosophies, and whatnot, and develop their models. Okay, and then we'll begin to train our teachers alongside of that, those models that we're building, that we're owning. Again, what I just told you about the data centers, we want to own our own data centers. We want to produce, not to be the consumers of that. We want to produce our own. We want to be the production aspect of things. Far too long, man, have we been the consumers of this stuff.
Yes.
On a terrible end. We're at the short end of the stick when it comes to this, and they're just dumping their waste onto our continent. So we want to produce that, push that back, okay, and start to build our own models based on the philosophical underpinnings that we understand to be true. This also helps to mitigate the bias. There's no way, again, as I was just discussing as being a developer, I'm going to come in really as with my own, Western philosophy and thoughts. You're not thinking of what goes on in Nigeria if you are a Western developer.
Yeah,
it's just not. It's not in the thought and even the language or the lexicon of those individuals. So, I mean, we can't just fault them for that. They're trained on a specific level. So here, that's where I'm at. That we build, we own, we produce.
Yeah. I mean,
our teachers. Go ahead.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that. We have a question from South Africa.
Sure.
James Orr is asking a question from South Africa. But before he asks that question, I'm going to make a comment, right, about the design and implementation of these AI systems. I've noticed something, like from the Harvard study that we saw, from the World Bank, study done in Nigeria. I noticed that they used, pre-engineered prompts to make their results possible, right? And with respect to just cultural relevance, you have touched on something that we should make sure that the compute, the data, and the algorithms used to make these AI systems possible are as African as possible.
Correct.
Now, I understand something that in the event that we have, in the event that we reach level 5, level 5 AI, that's autonomous organizations, there's every likelihood that we have something called, a collective ego death, right? When we realize that, the intelligence we think is, purely human, we have these systems that can actually do what we do better than we do it. So what makes us special? And so over the week, I was, having a conversation with someone, and then he referred me to a video. He asked me to go, watch a video about Igbo cosmology. So Igbo is, a tribe from southeastern Nigeria, and they are all over the world. So within Igbo cosmology, there is an inherent connectedness of all things, right? So all things are together. So there's no two things are separate. And the more I learned about, the connectedness of all things within Igbo cosmology, the more it dawned on me that something called quantum information panpsychism, which is, this new theory that is proposed as when, machines are all powerful and, they can do all the things that humans can do, that we adopt this new theory as what would make us special. So in essence, the person who is propounding this theory is saying that humans are not machines, that we emerge from something called the quantum field, and we're the observer, the observed, and the actor. So in essence, no matter how smart machines get, humans will always be special. But what was special for me in that realization, that's in seeing that what this person was speaking about in Western terms of quantum information panpsychism, that what this theory that he was talking about is in Africa, is already embedded within an African ideology, right? That was a big revelation, right? And which ties into this question now that James is asking. So he said, Reid Hoffman recently spoke and said that it is necessary to ensure that American value is baked into AI systems. And then James is saying that it seems to me that American values are becoming increasingly separate from African values. What is the true risk of having Western designed systems in Africa? Are there any empirical or other studies with evidence of the harm of using Western trained AI systems in Africa? So that's the question. I believe you can see, the question that he also asked, right?
Yeah.
And just to mention, before you answer, there was also a very interesting report from last week that seemed to indicate that the more advanced AI systems get, the more they have their own coherent value systems. In which case, the job of the AI lab is to try to enforce, their own beliefs or their own, worldview on this AI system. So maybe that can also help, how you're going to respond to this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's great. Hey, James, thank you for that. See, you're thinking here. This is really a beautiful question. And shout out to my tribe, Igbo. I mean, I really agree wholeheartedly with making sure that we're steeped within the cosmology, the philosophy, and thought. This is ancient thought we're talking. And this is really, let's get into it. This is really what we're talking about. We have it there. The epistemology is already there and present, and has been there even prior to what we're talking about with Gen AI and Western thought. Okay. For him, James Reid and these folks who are making sure that American philosophy is prominent throughout their systems, and Western thought is throughout their systems. Really, what we're underlying a lot of this is another type of imperialism and another type of colonialism. In this
digital
case,
colonialism,
as it's been called and I think used, digital colonialism. We get that, and I think this is really what I would say we want to make sure we push back on. Exactly why I was bringing up in the beginning of the conversation, why we want to throw out that playbook. Great is Harvard. It's nice. These are nice. These are very compelling studies, right? The data is interesting. We can glean from that and take that data and use it for certain purposes, but it's still, based in and rooted in a particular type of philosophy that's not African. Okay, and so I mean, at this point, we've been through this. And I said, we as the African diaspora, we've been through this. We've been through this kind of, we've been through this imposition of thought and philosophy for eons now. And this is just coming into a digital reality. That's it. So really the underlying part of this question is that we really need to get back to our own spiritual element. And when you're talking about the Igbo and the cosmology, we're really talking about our spiritual ancestral element has to be rooted into, if we're going to be building these technologies. Look, the technologies are here. It's amazing. You know, I use AI. You know, we're using them. But I don't want that to get out in front of what we're really dealing with, which is humanity is still, let's just say, for example, we didn't have Gen AI. We still need to make sure that we have some spiritual element between human beings here.
Yeah.
Right. And now that we do have these tools, okay, what I want is to, and I'm urging for, I'm on my soapbox about, is that we want to develop the foundational epistemological elements of our young people to be able to control these AI robots and these AI bots. So if you're building up a foundation of our young people who actually have critical thinking skills, cognitive level skills that can problem solve, and these types of things, then they can control the AI. We don't want it the other way around. We don't want AI controlling us. And I think that was part of one of the papers that you had referenced, is that the constant unloading that is occurring is that we are relying so much on the AI. And I'm saying we as a population, they're starting to see the studies of young people not being able to just do basic problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think to solve that is that we still need some kind of Socratic dialogue and real engagement from our professors and educators to make sure that there is a foundation, there's a fortitude of a strong fortitude that we have that has our children with the ability to have thought and more than anything, control, right? Ownership, where they can understand what to even prompt and question these AI bots. They're going to be here.
Yes.
Right now, what I'm hearing and what concerns me is that the AI bots and just AI generated models are controlling the emotions and behaviors of our people.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to flip that. And the way we flip that is going back to your element of what you're talking about, is steeping inside our own philosophy, because we understand, and we are our own, whether Igbo, as you were saying, in other countries and their own language, culture, their values, steep into that and make sure that that's the foundation. And then we can use these tools as these tools can be our slaves, not the other way around.
Oh, yes. Yes, and which is why, the Federal Ministry of Information, Communication and Digital Economy, they're currently running this project where they are, training a multilingual language model,
Yep.
right, which incorporates as many Nigerian languages as possible. So I know that the three major languages, Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, are included. So they're training this LLM that is well-versed in Nigerian languages. So that is a very important project, especially with respect to what we're talking about, retaining at least the core elements of the African identity as a way of just projecting it to the rest of the world, and maybe discovering the inherent wisdom in our different cultures. So what I'd just like to say to this is, I've had a lot of conversations around the world. Like, I've been in many different rooms, and I think what most people seem to agree with is that we may need a new kind of philosophy altogether to guide humanity in the AI age, right?
Sure.
Because this whole idea of this current system of humans as machines, or like education that trains people to function as parts of a big economic machine, may not survive, because you have labor, machine labor, that is as good as human labor.
Right.
What they do? So in essence, what I learned last week is that the wisdom within Igbo cosmology would rival, the wisdom of quantum information panpsychism and all the other new schools of thought for helping humanity maintain their uniqueness within this AI age. So yeah, and then so let's now go to something a lot more practical, something more technical. You are a developer, right? And you have seen instances of cases where you develop a solution for one kind of environment, like you're expecting that they have broadband internet, and then you give it to the user, and they work in an environment that has only 43.53% broadband penetration. That's the figure for Nigeria, right? So the country, according to the past government, they set out to achieve 70% broadband penetration by 2025, but currently is at 43.53%. That's not good enough. So for all of the conversations we have today about having an AI tutor that that can make a difference for different schools in different villages and what have you, with this low bandwidth, maybe sometimes offline situations that you have in different places, it can be a challenge. And when I say Nigeria, it applies to the rest of Africa. In Ethiopia, you have the same thing. In Ghana, the same. South Africa,
Sure.
Low bandwidth, poor internet connectivity. So that it may look as if, so if we're talking about these AI tutors or these AI solutions, that the people in the urban centers are the ones who enjoy it, and then the rural community, is completely cut off, right? And then it will look as if it's available to everyone in the, all the students in the US, the digital divide is about to get wider, right? And then we've heard the BlackRock CEO come out to say that it is pertinent that every developing country with a youthful population must prioritize education, like state of emergency, prioritize education to the degree that everyone who is out of school is educated, because that's the only way, we can survive in this AI native economy. So given your, developer experience, and then let me just give one more example. I've seen a startup. So what they've tried to do is, because of the broadband issue, what they've tried to do is they take a Starlink satellite to a rural community that works anywhere, right? And then they use that to, educate the school for however long they need to be there. They have very good internet and they have all of that stuff going. So given this problem of low bandwidth and then sometimes offline, completely offline situations in many parts of Africa, how do you think that we solve that problem? Right? We know that yes, this is a big problem. We need to solve it. Right? What's the best way? What kind of public-private sector initiative do you think is best for approaching this problem and solving it sustainably?
Do what Burkina Faso is doing. Shout out to our friends over at Burkina Faso. Shout out to that brother over there, those brothers over there. We are going to have, look, at this point, I mean, we could talk about the small scale. There's a lot of programs that small startups that are happening. The Kolibri project in Kenya. You have the Rumia initiative in Tanzania. You have all these small scale that are using low bandwidth or offline. Those are smaller scales. Okay, I appreciate that. But if we're going to talk about what you are referring to as a large scale across the board, whether we just take Nigeria, for example, as one country. But I'm looking at the entire African continent. But let's just take Nigeria. We're going to need some rising up. I mean, to say the least, of our government officials and the private sector and those entrepreneurs again working to make sure that there's a large investment and an encouragement of building up the bandwidth. We do, because how long are we going to depend on Elon Musk's Starlink? It's nice to have. I used it when I was in Ghana. I used it. Hey, it's great, and appreciate having that. But we can turn it off at a drop of a dime, right? If he wanted to. I mean, he could say, nope, we won't have it there any longer. So there's going to have to be some engagement within government, okay, and private sector and also entrepreneurism, that entrepreneurs, individual entrepreneurs, small startups and whatnot, and making sure that we are driving home these issues. There's got and putting this on the table as much as we can. I thought it was a relief to see the AU's document out there, but it's just a document. We have to execute. The document says, and the AU's document says from 2020 to 2030. So we're 5 years in. We're already 5 years in, supposedly to their 10-year plan. So where are we? Okay, where are we in that aspect? So here we are. Now, what I'm talking now, that's why I'm giving a shout out, Burkina Faso. I'm not, I think there might be something to glean from that. Take a page from what they're doing. Is that understood?
Yeah, sure. Definitely.
Because we've been at this for a long time.
Oh yes.
We've been at this for a long time. This is not to poo-poo your question. I am just saying that at this rate, if we're going to get motion and move the needle, we might have to take a page from our friends over there and our neighbors. Right?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I totally understand. I agree. I mean, I agree with your position, right? We need long-lasting, we need long-lasting solutions, sustainable, long-lasting solutions to, all of these problems that we talk about every now and then. Because it's not nice that, let's say, in 2025 we're talking about low bandwidth problems, and then 2027 the same issues are still there, right? So we need like this long-lasting solutions to the solutions to the problems that we've talked about so far, and if possible leverage our own resources, and of course the open source community, right? Expectedly, the LLMs that run on mobile devices that are as performant as the ones that you have on the web today will be showing up in 2026, right? And hopefully the open source community is also also provide those alternatives. So I do think that at some point, right, it will be possible to innovate with these smaller LLMs, smaller LLMs on device LLMs like the Gemini 8B model, right, which can be installed in Android devices. It's not as great as the bigger LLMs with 4 or 5 billion parameters and bigger capacity. But I do hope that with more innovation, then it will be possible to innovate for these offline and low bandwidth scenarios. Right. So I mean,
yeah, no, there's even companies are starting to look at miniature and small LLMs as a solution to even their own financial needs. These even larger companies. So it's there for the taking, as well as the open source. So for sure, there's some capabilities there.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes. So we have a comment from Felix Griffin, who said he saw a snippet on the news where technologists in Kenya were being paid $2 an hour to train AI, machine learning systems. So he says this must stop. Talent in the motherland must not be exploited. And I mean, I 100% agree with that position too. So Antoine Stephen Phillips is asking, what role does the African Union play in ensuring their investment money? There is investment money and political unity on the continent to achieve AI infrastructure development. So you might want to have a go at this.
Yeah. I mean, this is the AU. This is the African Union. So this is a conglomeration of all the leadership of Africa. Shout out to Antoine. I know him from or I've been in contact with him from Quid Pro Pro. I think this is an amazing group over there of just media conglomerate there, who is really identifying some of the needs of the African diaspora. So shout out to him on that question. But listen, they have a significant role in this. I mean, I'm talking about the AU here. We are looking at them as kind of discussing this and putting it on the table for world leaders to discuss. But again, it's a conversation. We want execution. We want a part of that as execution. And so this really is a call out from the AU to us entrepreneurs and and also the private sector. We're going to have to come to the table as well and demonstrate that we can not only bring in some levels of profit, which the private sector is looking at, but these studies that we've been talking about here all morning, which it can accelerate the development of our own people. We have to demonstrate that with our own studies. Okay, in this, yes, Harvard was able to do it, but and there have been some miniature studies here in Nigeria on the acceleration, but we want to make sure we bring that to the table and see how we can increase the intellectual capacity of our people there. So again, that AU, yes, they do have some funding, and this is a whole thing where, again, I'm calling out Burkina Faso because I'm hoping that our folks in these different governments look at that and get inspired by the fact that we are moving away from the colonial aspects, the old ancient colonial aspects that are embedded in the fabric of these countries, and start to make sure that we take back control. A lot of what I'm talking about today, is taking back control.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're having an AI conversation in a way, sort of, but it's whether it's the development of our own data centers, it's the development of our and the control of your intellectual capacity with your philosophy, our values, okay, and making sure that we have that. Building our own language models, we can leverage and use the open source.
Yeah,
there are some abilities for like we talked about, small language models.
Yeah,
Africa has an incredible mobile bandwidth for applications. That's one of the things that they do have. I see it with the mobile money. There's some incredible there. So there's a good start. But if we wanted to elevate past that, we need the AU to jump in with some serious capital and encouragement. And where, that is a whole thing. That would be a whole nother conversation, which we can have later on. Those finances and that kind of thing. Where would that go? Where is that type of money? Where is it leading us to? Into the pockets of individuals, right? What is that? And I think that's really a whole nother conversation. But again, this combination, Antoine, of private sector entrepreneurs and government within the AU, I think if we all are coming to the table, we can solve this. Listen, man, we have everything there. We have everything. We don't, if you think about it, we don't really need too much of this, quote unquote, partnership. Look, for a long time, we've seen the West come in and they've done a number on our continent. And what I mean by that was the colonialism, the imperialism, and whatnot. And this is for a long time, and they've crushed us with just debt that will never be paid back. And they've been extracting and exploiting our resources for the longest of time. Now, what we're looking at is, according to John Perkins, by the way, John Perkins is the bona fide economic hitman. And he's even discussing how China is doing the exact same thing. And I have close relationship with this because when I was in Ghana just recently, I saw China all over Ghana, and they're all over the Caribbean. And so they're doing the exact same thing, right? So according to John Perkins, that they are bringing in this same kind of economic hitman type strategies that we're talking about, right? That you know, they're just doing it less so with the heavy hand and fear, but with more of a smile and saying that they want to be partners. Yet they privatize these certain areas, whether it's the mines, the railroads, and other kinds of infrastructure. Okay, and that's similar to what we were dealing with the West before. So we haven't seen much of a change there in terms of how that strategy is, and that's even from the words in verbatim from John Perkins. So we have everything there. I think the AU putting out that document demonstrates, okay, we do have certain aspects. We do have thought leaders who are there who want this to happen. Now we have to protect that. We got to protect it, and we got to start producing and own a lot of this. And so this is for the taking. We really don't even need any other aspects of foreign types of interventions. I think that should be placed into the minds of policymakers today, our entrepreneurs. We have it right here. We have it. We have everything. So it's going to be a matter of the will. If right, it's not a matter of we cannot do this. It's the will. Okay, and so I'm gonna give another shout out to Burkina Faso.
Okay, thank you, thank you for that. Thank you for that response to the question from Antoine Stephen Phillips. So we have someone from Harvard, that's Felix Griffin. So he's just saying, he's a student of Harvard, and he's willing to, collaborate on something. So you can connect with Delante. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any, interesting ideas that you'd like to share, about AI in education on the African continent, definitely you can reach out to either of us or the ProDevs team, right? They are more than willing to, always work with you to, build out something. And then to one, other, thing that we're going to talk about today, the role of the teacher. How the role of the teacher is going to evolve in all of these, all of this change that is happening right before our eyes. And you said something at the beginning of this conversation, especially when you referenced that study, from Harvard, and also, the study from Edo State here in Nigeria, that if the AI is allowed to handle the foundational content, right, it allows the teachers to be a lot more creative in their engagement with, the students. And so I'm asking this question from the perspective of, something I heard last year, that if our technical skills are eclipsed, right, and this applies to all knowledge workers, if our technical skills are eclipsed, then our humanity will matter more than ever. And then humanity in this case is, our relationship to ourselves, being, our cognitive skills, thinking, critical thinking, complexity awareness, perspective skills, sense making, what have you, and then relating, how we care for others and the world, and then of course collaboration, social skills, and then acting, enabling change, being someone who is open to change, who is open to learning, and creating change in the world. So, what's the best way to ensure that as teachers are handling less and less of all the technical things that they do day to day, that we develop their humanity skills to a great degree? Because in some sense, the teacher is the model for the student, right? So, if you have a teacher who is very human in the sense that they are very connected to themselves, they are very self-aware, they are very open, they have a learning mindset, they are authentic, they have integrity, it can rub off on the student, right? So how do we develop teachers who are very human in their outlook to the degree that they influence their students? So in some sense, this is like saying, how do I become a good parent so that when I have a child, they can learn from what I do and not necessarily what I say, but by watching me, they learn from how I am, and they become good children by themselves. So how do we ensure that the humanity of these teachers, especially within the, within the African environment, and like within all the expectations of this is how to function within within the global business environment, right? How do we ensure that humanity is amplified as technical skills are in some sense diminished by all of these Gen AI tools we see every now and then?
Get back to our ancient roots. Really, to again, we have it there. Our own underpinnings, our own values. It's the original man and woman. That goes beyond just the modern period of AI. Make sure that we sit on the shoulders of our ancestors, and that the spiritual level of that. I want to push back a little bit on that of AI being the foundation and governing the foundation of our children. No, I'm actually calling for the opposite. We don't want the foundation of our learning to be dictated by these AI, especially if we're not controlling it. We're not controlling it. Because right now, the major controlling of a lot of this AI is from the West. But keep in mind that the humanity has to be there in terms of the engagement there through oral oration of our history, our language, our values through there. The AI can be as a tool, right? It can maybe even help the professors in some respects with doing minuscule type tasks like grading papers or putting together some type of lesson plan. I've even seen professors use the AI as a way to give feedback on how they're teaching the class. That's a practical thing that could be used. But in the end, really, what we're talking about is that I don't want to beat around the bush. It's our spiritual level of our folks, human to human, reaching back and sitting on the shoulders of those who were doing that originally before this imposition of Western philosophy and thought has been here in the modern day and age. As we coined the term, or we heard the coined term of digital colonialism, I think we're in danger of getting back that happening again if we're not careful. So we want to protect ourselves from this. We have everything that is there in terms of our level of thinking, our culture, our values. Make sure we reach back into that. Make sure that's solid, right? Underneath the foundation and the intellectual powers of our young people. And again, we were able to control these tools as they are just tools. That's simply what they are. But we don't want to use this as what's controlling us any longer. So yes, there are some practical things that these tools can do in the classroom and even outside of the classroom. Right? But I ultimately think where I'm hearing you say is that there's still a human connection that is necessary, right? Between professors, teachers, parents, and their kids, right? I mean, there's a study. Even let me, since we're talking about study, remember there's a study. I think it might have even been done by Harvard, where they were trying to see how new languages were taught to children, and in a control study, there was children who were learning through television, language through a television, versus the other study where it was children were learning through the mother and her oration or a motherly figure. It didn't even have to be a mother, but a motherly figure. And they showed through just even a longitudinal study that those people who were with their moms, those kids, excelled in their language development and probably in thinking altogether versus those who were just learning it through a television show. Now, I'm sure I'm gonna get some naysayers that say, oh, well, my kids will learn English by looking at Sesame Street or Muppet Babies or what. I'm dating myself, but whatever is the case. And then, of course, there's factors of people who pick up language a little faster than others. But I think what that study is demonstrating is that there's still something there where we can glean, we can look into the eyes of a child. Okay, they can hear us, they can see our mouth and how it's forming. It can hear the nuances of our language and our thought, where a television is just something that you're just perceiving and taking in information. But there's all these things that are not there when you're not dealing with the human interaction. So that is similar to how I think of AI. It's like, yes, AI is going to be there, but it's not going to replace something that's transcendental. That's soul, right? That is there, that is embedded within us, and we pass that on throughout time to other generations. That I want to bet that would never happen. I don't care what Elon is saying and others, Jeff Bezos, that soul will never be replaced. Will never be. We can't transcend that with even the AI. So I'm all for I want to push back on the AI being the foundational elements of teaching our young children. I think on the on one hand, we'll use it after we know that there's confidence in building up the intellectual capacity of our young people. They can then start to use it as a way of accelerating their task and research later on, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, and I have to say that I totally agree with you on the irreplaceability of the soul. But one more thing that is going to be replaceable, according to a study I saw last week, is that the job of the teacher is a very critical one because, like I said at the beginning, AI is 70% about people and cultural transformation. Yeah. And people and cultural transformation starts from the school, starts from education, which is why the first in this series is, AI in education and, how it affects the continent and, different African countries, right? And then, back to what I said initially when I talked about Igbo cosmology and how it lends a very important idea about the irreplaceability of the human being, even within Western culture. These days, when you talk about how Elon says, it's possible to have machines that are more human than human. I agree with you that I don't agree with him, right? Because that's transhumanism, right? The idea that we become entirely useless altogether. But I'm more on the transcendental side, that we have this parts of us that machines can never become in some way, which is this whole idea of QIP, quantum information panpsychism. It is within Western thought, but if you look at different African cultures, you'd find this, you'd find that idea inherent within all of these different places.
That's right.
So we're still open to questions. We've had questions from Antoine. We have questions from James Hall, South Africa, from Harvard, as the US. We've had questions from Ghana, and then I believe this is from Uganda. I'm not sure now, but if you do send in a question, so it's from all over we've had people from all over the continent participating to this session, which is exactly what we set out to do, to just have this practical conversations about what will it take for us as a people to build out our own human capacity. And then we started the conversation not just about human capacity and skill development. We looked at the other fundamental pillars, the infrastructure pillar, the policy pillar, the innovation and entrepreneurship pillar, which makes AI take. It's not just about human capacity development and upskilling and what have you. That's just one one pillar. There are at least three other fundamental pillars that must be considered. So for every document that we've referenced in this session, the AU Digital Strategy document 2020 to 2030, the World Bank study in Nigeria, the Harvard study, and the how AI impacts critical thinking paper, we'll link all of it to the description of this video on YouTube and every other place where the video will be published. So you can go and check out those studies yourself. And part of why we actually chose this topic is because we see that a lot of universities, right? A lot of universities in Nigeria and around Africa are considering integrating AI into their curriculum, into how they teach and what have you, because they see other schools doing it. I know that the California State University, CSU, they are the first AI-powered university in the world. Over 100,000 people there use ChatGPT and Edu, and that's something that needs to happen for every other school that you have in Africa. But I'm well aware that not every not every university can pay the license for that kind of subscription. So we're looking at all the ways that even if we can't pay for it, how can we innovate around the existing challenges, and then still participate and actually educate people, create graduates or people who are fit for this AI native world. And so, which brings me to the next question about student motivation. There's a possibility which I've seen. I've observed it, with professionals, maybe not in a school setting, but I've seen that it is possible that when you have low digital literacy, right? Again, this is me just asking that if you have a case of low digital literacy, which is that this person has not been exposed to as much computers or the internet as possible, or as should be the case, that they could be discouraged from using AI or suffer demotivation, right? And in this case, that how do you address this kind of situation? Do you need teachers to help them, show them, and tell them, look, you need to study this, this, or how do you motivate someone who has low digital literacy and then they have the opportunity to use this new tool to create an interactive learning experience for themselves?
Well, first we'll need, as we talked about earlier, our own teachers to have their own digital literacy. That's going to be key for being able to communicate it to someone who never even have seen a computer before, right? So that's the first thing. The other thing is that young people, and depending on which age bracket we're talking, I mean, again, we don't want to bucket everyone into, you got sort of elementary, right? You got sort of high school and maybe collegiate type age group. They're all going to have different levels and values and development of their values and experiences, right, throughout the time. But if we're talking about young people, there's so many different ways that you have to motivate. You have to at least show how this actually has reasoning in the universe, what the purpose of these things are for, right? Because if you're just kind of putting it out in front of them, what's the reason? Why are they doing this? And demonstrate how this actually has some relevancy to their life, and engage them in that way, right? And have some analogies to how this could be used. And we're talking about very, very young people, the elementary type age group. And so this has been studied appropriately of how to get young people involved in certain things. But we're talking about high school students. There's certain levels of that they're at that they might have already gotten a level of motivation, but we have to engage them in a different way than we would for a young person in an elementary age group, right? Usually a high school student needs more experiential, needs to move and see how it could relate to the real world as well. This is where I think things like apprenticeships or internships or the ability to kind of work with even the private sector, and how this stuff actually relates to real world scenarios and how they can be involved in changing that. Similarly to the college age grouping, right? They're sitting there and they're doing research in college. We want to make sure that they are tapped into the reality. Far too much, and what we find with colleges today is that there's a distinguishment with what they're doing theoretically in school system versus what exactly is happening in the real working world. There's a real dichotomy there. Have you noticed that, you go to school for something and then you end up not actually doing the exact same thing that
Oh, it happens all the time.
that happens all the time. And people are just like, well, what did I learn all this for? Like, why, even myself, I went to computer science, but I don't use calculus 3 at all in my daily life. I mean, I don't think I've ever used it in my computer science work and my technology work at all. So what are you doing it for? Well, I guess, it gets you to higher learning, and they sort of force that onto you to learn and check the box off, right? Now, I guess I would become a aerospace engineer, perhaps. It's necessary for that. But if we're engaging people on what their passions are very early on and what they might want to do to solve problems for the world, not just what their career is going to be, because that's a different, forget the career question. What do young people, I asked even my young, what do they want to do to solve problems for the world today? How do you want to do it? You ask them very young, and then you guide based on their thought of how, in fact, they want to solve those problems. Don't just ask them what they want to be. This typical thing you get here in the West. What do you want to be when you grow up? It's hard to say now what people are going to be because there's so much unemployment. So that's a frightening thing to say. And it's unemployment all over the world, right? There's people underworked, underemployed, right? And so let's actually engage them and say, hey, what is it that you want to do to solve the problems in the world today? And those young people, they're just, and I'm talking about even from elementary age, even preschool age, will tell you, hey, I've seen this issue and I want to solve this problem. I want to, make sure that we solve cancer or any kind of disease, human disease. I want to have clean air and energy and these kinds of things. They will tell you. We guide those young people into that, and we can use, in fact, the information that we're dealing with AI that has done all the calculations and show them, hey, look, you see that? Well, you can work alongside of this to solve that problem. Okay. Oh, you want to build fusion power for Africa, which we need? Okay. Well, what's the possibilities of fusion power today? Oh, okay. Well, we might find a young person in Africa who actually solved, or young groups of people in Nigeria who solved the fusion energy problem. And we can use the AI as a companion to those young people, but they have to see that there's some reality and it goes along a certain pathway, and it's relevant to the universe in which they live. It's not just some theory.
Yes.
So ask that question, Orokwe. What do you want to do to solve problems? Which problem do you want to solve today? And they'll tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I agree with that line of question, that way of helping people discover what they want to do, especially because, I mean, if you ask a lot of people who are in the AI space, they'll tell you that we're heading into a time when you merely guide the machines to do the work for you. So you're more like a manager of intelligence.
Correct.
Right. So your intelligence is applied to guiding intelligence to realize an objective, which is part of what what AI literacy is about. Knowing when to delegate to the machines and then when to inject your 0 to 1 idea, right? As I say, AI, the human is great for 0 to 1. So you give it, you give the machine an initiative, and then for going from 1 to 100 or 1 to 1,000 or 1 to whatever, the machine can definitely just amplify that and take it to wherever however far you need it to go, right? Which brings me to this question. We have about 20 minutes to go. We've been talking for 1 hour 40 minutes.
Are people all right? Are they still engaged? This is
I didn't know it was that long, but we'll be here. We'll have about 20 minutes to go. So if you have any questions whatsoever, so just simply leave a comment and we'll try to answer the question to the best of our ability.
Thank you.
So that paper about the impact of AI on critical thinking, and we saw that younger people are more susceptible to being influenced by AI. And according to the chief marketing officer of OpenAI, I heard this on one of the fireside chats that she was present.
Yeah.
That at least 80% of the people who use ChatGPT are under the age of 35, right? Yeah. Which means that we risk having like a whole generation of people who have poor critical thinking skills because of over-reliance on AI. And this is something we saw in December last year. There was a time that ChatGPT went down for a couple of hours. And there were so many memes on Twitter like, today, nothing is going to get done today because so many people do not have their brain with them today. So that was something. And a lot of people laughed about it. But then it became clear as the research paper started to roll out that, look, there's a clear relationship between over-reliance on AI and poor critical thinking skills. So what I'm going at is active learning. How do we promote active learning in schools so that we train students more like Olympic athletes, right? Yes, so we train them like these athletes that have this ability in their body, so that even if for any reason they don't have access to AI, they have this core foundational skills that is embedded because of how they were trained in school. Even if we have to use AI within the curriculum, how do we ensure that the way it's used is in a way that encourages active learning? So maybe like what Khan Academy is doing with Khan Migo, where it doesn't give you all the answers directly, but it just guides you step by step. If you ask it, so what's the way to do this math problem, it wouldn't give you the answer, but just guide you through discovering the answer for yourself. So what other strategies do you think that we can integrate, especially in the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math, which is critical to everything we're hoping to achieve as a continent? What other strategies do you think that we integrate in the different schools on the continent so that active learning is encouraged, and even if teachers and schools have to use AI, they're not using it at the detriment of critical thinking and all the other skills that students must have to function in the AI native economy?
Yeah. This is wonderful. Wonderful question. I think there's been some tried and true methods out there already that we can tap into or quick that if let's just say we're going to use AI, but I still, again, want our teachers to be doing this, our professors to do this. We can train even the AIs on critical thinking exercising. And by the way, I want to have a call out to our entrepreneurs to build something where there's debates between the AI and maybe the student, let's say a college student, because they've already had the critical thinking exercises as a foundation before. But debates, these have been useful speech and debates Okay. Case study working where there's active work on something that's a real live problem that has happened before. Even here in the West, MBA programs still today use case studies. I went through my business program. It was all case studies. So let me give a call out to our entrepreneurs building this kind of thing where they're engaging with students on case studies, speech and debating. Okay. Where it's going to be necessary for professors and teachers is still the deep engagement with readings, because especially with younger students, making sure that they're actually getting conceptually what they're reading and analyzing it. Okay. So call out to my entrepreneurs, making sure that there's some conversations, some debating, but also some analysis and deep analysis there. Did we lose our guy? Oh, well, I'll keep going. Orkwe is gone, so I'll just keep talking. The other one that I'm thinking here is apprenticeships. Really, that these are, and I've called this out a couple of times, and I'm gonna just go ahead and, this is sort of there you go, Orkwe. You're back. You're back. Okay.
Yeah, I just dropped off briefly.
You dropped off briefly. Yeah, I was talking about apprenticeships. I'm just writing these down as you were bringing up. But I have a shameless plug for one of my startups, which is called New Apprenticeship. You can put that in the chat. New Apprenticeship, where we are taking people from all walks of life, training them up, hands-on training at a company, right? And while they're getting paid, so they're earning while they're learning. The last piece of this that I was saying, and there's other suggestions, I'm sure, but really metacognitive skill development. And what I mean by that is diaries or reflection journals, right? And I'm not even talking about typing. I'm talking about writing. As studies have shown, writing, there's a certain level of memory for your hand onto a paper and a connection to your brain and the processes that go on in the neurological processes that are happening there. So I've named a few already as a practical elements, both for the training of our AIs, but also for our professors and teachers, where they can start to engage students on debating, again, speech and debates, case studies like the MBA. And you don't need to just go to Harvard Kennedy School of Government to just have debate. We could have these debates and case studies right away, even at a high school level, even at a middle school type level, in terms of age bracket, as long as they are understanding that. But we want to be able to bring that early on and start to tap into the critical thinking of mechanisms of our young people. I said, again, deep engagement with the readings. So analysis on the readings. Apprenticeships is another one. And then metacognitive skill development, which is diaries and journals. People used to write a lot more, right, in terms of journals, before computers and the internet and all this kind of thing. A lot of what we know, whether it's any kind of history, is through people's writings and drawings. So the reflections in people, we can understand how people thought back in history, and we can understand them by their reflective journals, and we can piece together our history. So we want our young people to begin writing those things. There are still some companies that do that make you, even though I know of some, even here in the West, some technical companies that would make you do technical exercises. Sure, if you're a software developer or whatnot, but then they say, take away all that and let me see how you critically think and have problem solving. So they take away all the computers and have just pen and paper. and they pose questions to those future employees to see if they can actually think on the spot. Can they think about a real problem? That's still useful. And I would say that we can, to be able to get a person like that, you want to build them up from a young age to do that.
Oh yes, yes. Is my audio still? Can you see me? Can you hear me correctly?
We can hear you. You're a little bit lower now, but we still can hear you.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. So let me just try to project it a bit more. I've had to change my microphone halfway into the, we're almost done now. So it's just about 10 minutes, and then the conversation is wrapped up, right?
Sure.
Antoine Stephen Phillips, he has another contribution. So from what he's hearing, Africa will need competent education consultants, quid pro quo, to engineer a top-down structure to achieve a mass STEM impact versus individual success, which some in the West are okay with. And I agree with what he has submitted. Karina Dambo, yes, we see you. Thank you for joining today's conversation. Kevin Fomenja, writing the lost art. Oh yes.
Thanks, Kevin.
But in some sense, what people are always saying to with respect to handwriting and the laptop or the personal computer, that the advent of the personal computer affected handwriting, and a lot of people started to have bad handwriting. What does that say with respect to mental capacity, like critical thinking, which we've mentioned it a lot since we started? It is possible that a lot of people will have, poor critical thinking ability because of all of these cognitive offloading that they are now able to do, because they can just ask deep research, go to the internet and do a research for me about all of the all the best suppliers of a particular product, and it will go off and do the research for them and give them very good feedback that is professional enough to be used in within the enterprise environment. So I think to wrap up, we can just go to the subject of policy and ethics, data sovereignty. At this point in time, the digital infrastructure to build AI, we do not have it on the continent. We may have the innovation and entrepreneurship we have that in abundance. But again, we see that the venture capital to actually build out the solutions still largely come from outside the continent.
Yeah.
Right. So it looks like the only thing we do have is maybe the policy, the policy and the policy and government government contributions is not quite there yet, but different governments are making moves. So it looks like the only thing we do have now is the human the human capacity and the possibility of upskilling our population. But be that as it may, if we decide to deploy these AI tutors, what we still notice is that the data, because we don't have the data centers, I talked about infrastructure to start with, the data will not be resident, may not be resident within within Africa. So in some sense, I know what we need to do. That okay, yes, we need to build out our own infrastructure, but what else can we do to protect the data that we generate from the use of from the AI that we use within our own context? For instance, that World Bank experiment in Edo State, Nigeria.
Sure.
The data belongs to Microsoft, right? They just they chose to publish because Copilot was what was used to drive that experiment. But how do we ensure that what we do, the innovations, the innovative techniques we might discover within our own learning environment is protected, right? And it's something that the data that we generate from all of those different experiments is used responsibly.
Yeah, let me put a call out to one of the things what I'm noticing is we need the expertise of developing and producing our own data centers and these things. We need it, and there are folks all over the world and that are part of the African diaspora that have been trained and developed on this. But we need more. We need more. So let me put a call out there for educational levels of those who actually want to get involved in this kind of revolution, to begin to train themselves on building, managing, creating data centers. And we can start from a smaller scale. Okay. Just small buildings. You don't have to have any large campuses at this point, but start small and begin to expand that throughout the continent. But I am putting out a call out to those people, and I want to harken back to what Antoine was talking about as consultants coming from the African diaspora, who are all over the African diaspora, like myself, who are living in the West and could be working and partnering real partnerships with our continent, with Africa, not what China is doing, what they calling a partnership, but then leaving out the Africans from that. So, what they're doing now is building all this stuff there, China, but they're not utilizing our own African people, right? Our people to build and get that skill set. So what I'm proposing here is that, no, we do actually have folks all over the world who have the know-how, but to come back and work with Africa, in particular, we're talking about Nigeria, to build out and produce our own data production, right? Our own data centers, right? We can utilize and leverage open source, okay? And begin to build our own models again, okay? And then protect our elements, our own, using our own values, our own language, and making sure that that's there. So yes, we don't have large scale venture capital, but there's enough, forgive me, there's enough people out there that are empathetic to this cause. So I'm putting out a call out to them who are listening and those who are going to be listening later to the recording, that we need you to come back. Everything starts in Africa, everything. Where Africa goes, or the rest of the diaspora goes. So, and we have to come back to that motherland, because that is sort of the central piece of this right now. So I am calling, this is where my work is coming to play. Yes, I am doing a lot of stuff here. And you guys reached out to me because I'm working directly with African governments and entrepreneurs in Africa. So I'm going to challenge those who do have the know-how, do have the financial means to project themselves out, lean in a little bit more. We need it. We need it at this point. And so I think that there's possibilities there. I am involved in conversations all over the world of people who are wanting to do this. Now it's just a little bit of the unification of but we're sitting on such an intellectual powerhouse of people and finance. I mean, even just in the US alone, the Black and African diaspora community is incredible in terms of, quote, GDP and whatnot, or the financial structures there. We could be pulling that together. Look, I'm seeing all the Black African Americans or Black Americans who are going back to Nigeria, going back to Ghana. They're becoming Ghanaian citizens. You see? Have you seen this? Right? This is an incredible amount of Ghanaian citizens all of a sudden. What I'm a challenge, though, to my folks who are there, don't use that as a vacation home, as a retirement home. Don't use Ghana as a retirement home. That's all right. It's great that you're going back home. We love it. We love that there's a call back there, but we want them to utilize their know-how and their resources that they brought from the West, and they've been trained over here and built up in the West as their nest egg, and build up Ghana, build up Nigeria. So I am challenging my own people here who do have the know-how, who do have the financial resources, okay, and help to bring this to fruition. Because far too long we're just talking about it theoretically. No. The reason I'm talking to you all is because I want to move the needle. I've canceled. There was a few other webinars that have invited me on, and it was outside of the values that I'm thinking about right now. So I canceled them. It was like 2 or 3 other webinars even before this one. This here is more important And I think there's an opportunity right now. And I know we got one more minute to seize the moment right now. And that's it. Let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you one question because okay, before we go, I have to ask you this.
Hey, I'm okay, but I want to make sure our audience sticks with us. Confidence just jumped back on, man. Now he's left. So.
Yeah. So another question is, so the World Bank study, which was done in Nigeria, indicated that in 6 weeks we can help students achieve 2 years of learning. And then what I kept thinking is it possible that in 12 weeks we can go through, let's say, 4 years of 4 years of learning, which means that when I'm thinking of education is instead of spending 20 years, we have a system called the 6-3-3-4, right? 6 years in primary, right? 3 years in junior secondary, 3 years in senior secondary, and then 4 years in university. That's the expectation, right? But what I see with AI, the Harvard study.
Can I put you on pause for a second? Sorry, audience. Let me just put you on pause just for a second. Because we're coming up in time. So hang on 1 second. 1 second.
All right.
I'll be right back in a moment. I'll be right back.
Oh, Felix thinks the webinar is too short. We're back here. We're back again next month. We've talked about education today, but we'll be back again next month to talk about okay, a monologue. This is my monologue. We'll be back again next month to talk about some other topic. The reason we have chosen education is because, like I said, AI is 10-20-70. It's 10% about technology and the tools. All the stuff you hear on the internet, on LinkedIn and Twitter about AI, it's just 10% of what goes into making AI a success. That's all the tech and tools. DeepSeek, ChatGPT, O1, Deep Research. That's all 10%. 20% business process and systems, and then 70% people and culture transformation. And the only way that you make people and culture transformation possible is a sound education system. Right. So it's the bedrock, for making everything else happen. So the Delante is back with us. I promise I won't keep you any longer.
No, apologies for that. I had to pause for a second because we're up on. I had another meeting, but we're good. We're good.
Okay.
We're good here.
Fantastic. Okay.
I love talking to these people.
So the question is, in Nigeria and a few other African countries, they are thinking of redesigning the system of education. So instead of having a 6-3-3-4, they're thinking of a like a 6-6-4 sort of, or a 10-4 kind of system. And when I heard that news, what came to my mind was, you don't need to spend this much time, and you don't need to spend this much time in school. So instead of a 20-year education system, what are the possibilities of, let's say, instead of a 6-6-4, you have a 6-3-2, right? Save 6 years, save 4 years, save. In fact, instead of spending 20 years in school, is it possible to cut that time in half, right? People graduate at maybe 16, 17, 18, and then they are left to go function in the AI native economy. I think that's a possibility. I don't know how you might relate to that.
Yeah, again, well, people are different. I want to be respectful of the different kinds of pace of every individual. Everyone's different. But overall, I think we're wasting kids' time. I mean, there's no need, like what people, especially here in the West, are doing in their 4 years, they can probably do 4-year university, could probably have done really in high school. The structure today is so arbitrary now. I mean, even the instructional level of how we interact with the professor, you got, we're sitting at rows, these seats, and then there's a professor up there kind of waving their hands. That goes back, at least in the West, that goes back to the 19th century and industrial age, and how they were sort of putting through certain assembly lines. So this is an old, outdated type system. And even the way we time things is outdated. You wonder why they're still doing it. A lot of it to do, at least in the West, for profit, because the crushing amount of debt that students are going through here is just remarkable. It's, I mean, there's just no way, especially our people. I mean, there's more debt that they're taking on, which cripples their ability to progress in society and doing the basic things, of whether it's getting a home or even really having children. That's what we want. We want them to have the financial stability and the confidence that they can have more children. Not even just a home or car, but can they feel confident that we can procreate? If they don't have the financial elements there, they probably won't. And so there's been a slowdown here on that. But yes, I do agree that there can be an acceleration very much intellectually, even without Gen AI. We're just wasting a lot of their time, a lot of our time. I know, they're circling through and going through the motions, a lot of these students, and then, stumbling into, through elementary school, and then they go here, there's a middle school, and then there's a high school, and then, and then there maybe college or something else. I think there's the ability, and I'm gonna make another shameless plug, where apprenticeships used to be a model here. I think there's the capabilities for that, where they can get out into the real world, they can learn, right? But they can interact in a real world scenario with real problems, right? Early on. And I think there's been many studies on this that we can quote, and we can put it into the chat later on. But this is not a new issue that we're talking about. Yeah, we understand very much all over the world that there's time that could be spent elsewhere using it. Look, that's all we have as human beings, right? That's the commodity we have, is time.
Oh yes, yes.
And so we don't want to waste people's time. That's all. If that's the only commodity we own that God has created in the universe for us, we want to use that effectively, in a sense. And so people just stumbling through, and after 20 years, they finally get into some kind of real world. Oh my goodness, they're in the real world all of a sudden. And then even in that real world, they still have to take 2 or 3 years just to get into it, because whatever they learn in college or high school doesn't apply. So they're spending more time wasted there. So if we're going to use AI, yes, we can use it as an acceleration of that for high school and college students, and more importantly, for the educational system, right? Doing planning, right? Grading, doing minuscule tasks, giving feedback on their pedagogy. These are all things that could be used from the AI tools that we have at our juncture right now. The tools are going to get better. They're going to get better. It's going to be incredible when we're talking about that. But I want to go back again before we get off. If there's any takeaway that we have from this call, if people are saying, is our roots, is our ancestry, is a human spiritual connection that still has to be there. I mean, we're going to have the tools. That's fine. You have a fork that you can eat, or you eat with your hands, whatever. You have tools that that help us leverage and move faster. They're just tools, though. You want to go from, what I think of AI is, it is Google to AI is like a screwdriver to a power drill. That's what I think of AI. AI is a power drill. It's powerful. It is. Yeah. But it's just a tool for and then we want to use it as such. But the takeaway here, before we hop off, and I know we went over time, is that element, is our values, is our ownership, is taking back and empowering our individuals again to use these tools as tools and control them. So that's what I'll have to say on these kind of closing notes.
All right. Thank you so much. I promise not to take any more of your time after that question, after that, response. Thank you very much for spending 2 hours and 10 minutes with us. We were gonna, we worried that we're not going to last up to 2 hours. But now I understand, how it is possible to get in a podcast and speak for 3 hours, 4 hours, even 5 hours.
Oh yeah,
Now
you
I know
could.
how it happens. So
Yeah.
I'm confident. Confident. If you have any words for us, the stage is all yours now. Maybe 30 seconds, 1 minute, so that we'll close out with your your speech. Confident, you're there.
Yeah, mic check. 1, 2. Am I audible?
Oh yes, you are.
Oh, great. Okay, because when I tried to open the session earlier, I think my mic just decided to retire on me.
Oh,
Okay,
Glad to
thank
have you back. Glad to have you.
Yeah, I've been following through in the background all along. Thank you very much, Irakwe. Thank you so much, Delante. Um,
Thank
I
you.
initially tried to do like an intro of what ProDev stands for, but my mic like failed me. So I will just go over that in a few seconds. So ProDevs is, I would say, is a family or community of top tech talents in Africa, and what we do is to connect them to founders, um, like you mentioned, entrepreneurs back in Africa and even in diaspora.
Nope. See, we need the AU to come in with some infrastructure for
oh
confidence.
yeah, yeah,
Come on,
yeah.
AU.
That's why we discussed
That's why we're
infrastructure.
having this conversation.
Yeah,
He
it
can't
needs
even.
to happen. It needs to happen. And then, Antoine is saying time to arrange a conference. William is on the call, so he can hear you. Time to arrange a conference. William will see to that. The only
Okay.
commodity in the world is time. Kevin for Menga. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
my own parting shot will be, so in this whole this whole AI revolution, we know that like I said before, there's going to be this collective ego death that may happen at some point in time. The philosophy, or the new way that we need to start to appreciate reality is within African culture, right? So if we have if we have the wealth of wisdom within African culture to help the world, then I believe that we should be at the forefront of actually leading all of what is happening with AI space. We may not have the compute, we may not have the algorithm, we don't have the data to maybe pursue some of these advancements at the at the forefront, like the labs in China and the US are doing. But I think that the wisdom to help the world navigate the confusion of this time can be
Mm,
found within our African traditions. So
mm.
I think the wealth of that, we must leverage on it to help the world however much we can. So like as promised, this webinar is a monthly series. We'll be back in March with another guest, and I'm very sure because of how much we've enjoyed this session, Delante is going to be back at some point in the future, right? Um, Kevin has suggested a conference. Maybe sometime this year we're going to have a conference where Delante comes to share with us live, and we can have administrators, government people from
Sure.
as many African countries as possible. We've had Ghana here represented, we had South Africa represented, we had Uganda represented, had
Sure.
Nigeria represented in today's session. I'm pretty sure that after this session, many more Africans from many different parts of Africa are going to watch this. So if you want to connect with Delante, he's available on LinkedIn. So reach out to him. He's the very accomplished education consultant. He's going to be able to help out with a lot of the questions you're going to have with respect to deploying AI responsibly, deploying AI in a way that it does not harm your students, right? A lot of schools, yes, are thinking of AI, but you have to think about it correctly. Delante is who you can talk to help you, deploy AI responsibly. And if you're talking about policy, yes, he's also your guy for policy. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'll stop here now, and I look forward to meeting you all again. Perhaps the last week of March, we're going to have another competition centered on AI, unlocking AI for Africa. We talked about education today. Perhaps the next time we're going to talk about the manufacturing sector. We're going to talk about the cybersecurity sector, what have you. So again, thank you, Delante, for showing
Thank
up.
you.
Thank
Thank
so
you,
much for
Rakwe.
today.
Yeah. I want to also mention I picked two major things amongst the many things that Delante talked about. One is we having our own data, having our own kind of, let's say our own African-based ChatGPT or DeepSeek, right?
Yes.
That really like went down my notes. The second is it didn't really come as much. I don't know if he like saw it as a major thing, but that debate system, AI-based debate system, is something I took down, and I think I'll be making it a pet project this weekend. Yeah, I would definitely try something out and tag you on LinkedIn, and I would love to try it out. Yeah, I already spoke with William about it a few minutes ago, and he was like, "Oh, that's really great one." So I'll try it out. I'll do an MVP of it, and I'll share it on LinkedIn and
nice
feedback. Yeah,
nice. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And remember, our folks, even here in the West, we crush it in debate. I mean, I hate to reference movies, but that one movie with Denzel Washington, the debate, right? The Great Debaters, we crush it. So let's do it.
yeah.
We can do it. We are the debaters. We're the best at it.
Of course.
We're the best at it. We can crush anyone on planet Earth.
For
In a
sure.
good way. In a good way. We're competitive. Right? We're not violent. That's the other thing about our people. We're not violent. Right.
All right.
All right. So a few of the names that have commented today: Antoine, Stephen Philip, Kevin Fomengia, William, of course William would have commented, Edna Tuckson, Felix Griffin, both from Harvard. Yes, thank you for joining. Karina Dambo, the architect, thank you for joining. James Paul, Oluwa Tobiloba Adu, Thurston Mokwelele, and Abdul Rashid Bello. Thank you all for commenting and for sharing your questions with us. We'll see you again in March with another extended conversation. Thank you once more, and it's a goodbye, and have a lovely weekend from us.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.